Good morning, everyone. I hope you all had a great keynote session. So the topic for today is obviously maximizing the value of IoT, but I will cover a bunch of things. Most importantly, what is the implications of IoT on people who are over here, i.e. people who are related in the data industry. But before I do that, I just want to understand what's the mix of the audience. So how many of you are from Hortonworks over here? Just one, okay. And from an industry perspective, who's here from manufacturing or automotive? Retail? Pharmaceuticals? Or health? None? Okay, one. Financial services? Utilities? Perfect, thanks. So if I ask you guys to pick the first word which comes to your mind in your specific industry as far as IoT is concerned, what would that be? Anyone, if you can just shout. The first word which comes to your mind. Sorry? Factories. Brilliant. Anything else? It doesn't come to you. None of you have heard IoT before, is it? Performance, okay. Factories, performance, what else? So I'll help you with it. Predictive maintenance, a lot of people say. If it's financial services, a lot of people say loyalty. But anyways, the reason why I'm asking is because you will see that when I continue with my presentation, there are 9 different settings whereby you can make an impact on IoT-related institutions or IoT-related functions and domains. And the first word generally which comes to mind for each of those settings has the least economic value for that. And I'll explain to you what it is. But you get on, because most of the people have come in. So this is what I'll cover today. What is the value of the IoT, which includes the economic impact, which includes what is the manifestation of that across different settings, which includes what does it mean for organizations and how should they go ahead with it. Second, how do they actually create value? So give you examples, not only from B2B organizations, but also from a consumer space as well, because at the end of the day, the end consumer gets affected more than anyone else. The third, we'll talk about key enablers and barriers. And obviously, the last one is, what is the implication to the society at large, which includes B2B organizations, which includes policymakers, and also includes the consumers themselves. So, this is the reason why I was asking the question. So if you look at the overall IoT market, the potential size of the pie in terms of the value and the economic impact, there are multiple studies done by that. The source for this one obviously is the Mckinsey research, which came out last year. And it says it's $11.1 trillion. $11.1 trillion. We can argue on that, and we can say, oh, it's high, it's low. But in terms of the split, most of the reports which have come out, it's very similar. So if you look at factories and retail, which is a lot of people said, the first word which comes to mind, that is the one key area which gets mostly impacted. But it's nothing to do with sensors only. It's a much larger pie, which I'll explain. Second, which no one mentioned over here, is vehicles and cities. So vehicles doesn't necessarily mean the autonomous drive and all of it, but how does it link with the smart cities, and what is the impact of that to multiple functions in a particular city? What is the impact on public services? What is the impact on transportation? What is the impact on transportation security, etc.? And the third one is home and human, and that's why I was asking about health, because obviously we are all familiar with wearable technologies which have come in, but that's on the consumer side. There's also the entire provider space and the home space. So a lot of examples have started to come up whereby large organizations, including the likes of Google, Amazon, etc., are using augmented reality to go ahead and start condition monitoring inside your homes. Why? Because that will allow you to optimize not only your energy bills, but also will allow you to plan for the future, and specifically if you have kids. So that is one large area which is untapped. Now, the key thing to note over here is that obviously these numbers will be realized by 2025, so they don't exist today. From a maturity standpoint, factories and retail obviously are the most mature. But if you ask most organizations, and there was a survey which was done 1 year after this report came out, and it was only for CEOs, no COO, no CIO, nothing. And it was asked, what is the largest impact of IoT? And there were only 2 points which resonated across, which is enabling new business models, and transforming business processes. Now, if you look at the share of how you can transform that, typically, for every dollar that you invest in a business, which is to optimize a particular process or optimize a particular business process, the return that you get is anything between 0.67 cents to 1.2 cents. If you invest $1 to disrupt your existing go-to-market strategy and you want to go ahead and create a new business model, typically the return is $2.3 to $3.5, assuming you've done it right. So what CEOs believe is that most of them do not necessarily want to go ahead and improve the business processes. Yes, that's important, but that's just run-of-the-mill. And they want to move away from it and venture into new areas, which is where the whole borderless economies comes into the picture, which is where the entire areas where industry barriers are cutting through comes into the picture. But those are the key points which is top of mind for CEOs. Now, we do talk about these values, so I do want to give you a quick snapshot of what does it mean in terms of very specific settings, which I said. So don't focus on the bullet points over there. I will read them out. But if you look at the left-hand side, which is the chart over there, those are specific examples that you will get in terms of how do you create value. Now, someone said factories over there, but factories could mean multiple things. It could mean optimization of the processes, which we said. It could mean worker settings. It could even mean using predictive maintenance to go ahead and transform your asset optimization engine. So there's one part of it which is asset optimization of your assets, which is a very normal big data use case. But who transforms or who optimizes the engine which is doing that? So you cannot do that only with big data because of the fact that you need to have that data to get through. So a lot of people believe that they use MEMS, which is a sensor, microelectronic controllers. So over the last 5 years, what has happened is the price of MEMS has gone down by 30 to 70%, which means a lot of new people have come into the field and it started to become very easy for them to optimize the performance of sensors. But can we do the same thing with RFID tags? Yes, we can. But what's the impact of that? In a factory setting, the impact is that if I have a production floor or if I have a shop floor whereby I'm putting RFID tags, for every RFID tag that I will put in going forward, if the price reduction is 30 to 70%, the impact on my operating margin will be 15%. Now, who controls the RFID market? It's the ecosystem play, which is where people are saying that it's not necessarily about the price of what you produce or what your consumers produce, but it's about how the ecosystem reacts. So the key thing over here is that across each of these various examples, be it home interactions or human or etc., it's the whole narrative is about the ecosystem play, and that is one of the key things that we should remember. The other thing which I would like to mention is interoperability. So out of the $11.1 trillion that we said at the start, almost 40% of that cannot be realized unless you have interoperability across systems, because these systems need to talk to each other. And given the fact that I just laid out the premise for ecosystems, you need these systems to not only talk to them in terms of creating business value, but also across various dimensions like cybersecurity, like going ahead and integrating with the existing legacy systems, because you can't replace all of them. So to give you an example, if you look at any oil rig, any large company, Exxon, BP, etc., most of them have 30,000 to 35,000 sensors on one particular oil rig. But the amount of data that they're collecting is massive. Only 1% of that is being used to get insights. So what is happening is you set up all of these sensors, you set up a process and a mechanism, but you don't have a process whereby you can harness that. And a lot of times is because you don't have that interoperability, because those systems don't talk to each other. So you will spend a fortune trying to clean the data to get an insight, and therefore it's very important. Another example is if you look at augmented reality. So that has multiple examples. In an e-commerce setting, a lot of people, or a lot of organizations for that matter, they've gone ahead and made massive investments whereby they can transform their supply chain for an e-commerce delivery. Why? Because every time, so the potential loss of sales for out of stock in a retailer impacts their margins by 15%. The potential loss of sales for an e-commerce player impacts their operating margin by 67%. Why? Because the more we become digital, the more people start to go on and have click behaviors, their loyalty to the specific provider reduces. So it's not about the brand necessarily, it's also about the service. So what they've done is that they're working with the back end of the supply chain providers, not the distributors, the people who take the stuff from the distribution center to the end delivery, but the people who get that to the distribution centers. And they're trying to manage that so that they can have a real-time demand flow optimization engine. Which means what? Which means if I'm on Amazon and if I am looking for mobile phones, the general rule of thumb was every time I would click something, that would go through my stock units. They would see if it's available or not. If it is, they would ship it out through logistics. How do they manage the demand? They do demand forecasting. That's what the rule was. But now what they're saying is that if I'm hovering around iPhones, and like me, there are 1 million people who are hovering around iPhones, there is a high possibility that of that, a certain percentage will buy. Pick a number, 60, 70%. They would have data to back that up. So what they're saying is, if I know that 600 to 700,000 people will actually click, can I put sensors on the people who are getting stuff to the distribution centers so that I can reduce my lead time by 10%? Because a reduction in lead time by 10% means an increase in their potential loss of sales, which was going out there. So those are the kind of things which are changing in terms of creating value. The last one, obviously, is smart cities. So we've all heard about smart cities. So there is no successful smart city in the world today. Obviously, there have been multiple projects, be it Dubai, Las Vegas, etc., but there are none. There are none which have been successfully implemented in a way whereby they would like to be. And a lot of research has been done around what is the biggest cause of the failures. And the result was that the applications which have been created, they are very, very B2C focused. Now, if you look at the 11.1 trillion number which we said, most of the value can be created by B2B applications, not by B2C applications. Why? Because it's a simple technology and supply game. So you've got the users, you've got the suppliers, you've got the tech in between. The people who are providing the tech, they understand the users and they understand the suppliers. The users don't understand the behavior of the suppliers. Suppliers don't understand the behavior of the users. So therefore, there's a larger play whereby people are saying, can we integrate all of them? Yes, you can, but how do you do it? The easiest way is whereby you use IoT-enabled solutions. And that means not only affecting the solutions for the city at large, but it also means taking that to connected homes. That also means taking to retail environments. That also means taking it to workmates, because a lot of factories whereby you have people reducing because of the onset of digitalization and the fourth industrial revolution, you need to connect all the dots, and only then will you be able to form a holistic view of what the users want and what the suppliers want. So those are the 3 key points which you should keep in mind. One is, as I said, interoperability is necessary. Otherwise, you will not be able to realize a lot of value. 40% is what the survey says. Second is, a lot of the IoT applications are not being used to generate insights. I gave the 1% example, and the last one is, you have to focus on the B2B side of things in addition to B2C. And as a matter of fact, B2B applications will allow you for 2 to 3x return as compared to B2C. So I thought I'll give you an example of what it means like from a real world example. So we work with a large mining provider in Australia. Not difficult to guess. So if you look at the entire scope of what IoT can do, this is exactly how it works, and I've just taken a stab at it. So everything obviously is connected, even in the underground. Now, how do you connect if you go into underground quarry mines? I don't know if anyone of you have been over there, but there are 2 types of mines. You've got the open cast, and they have the closed quarry mines. Closed quarry mines is very difficult to connect because of the fact that you will not have signals. The open cast are the easier ones. So you've got the employees who monitor everything from the start. You've got the mobile equipment. So these are trucks. They'll all have sensors. They'll all have Wi-Fi enabled devices, etc. You'll have the machineries which are working on the ground and underground. And then you will have the people at the end, the consumables who will take the production, which is cleared by QATS, which is cleared by the health and safety rules, and which is cleared by the R&D standards, and then they take that through. So in this particular case, what happened was they had a big issue because the Wi-Fi enabled devices weren't talking to the mobile equipment which was going in and up and down. So the way they fixed it was they said that, can we actually control and optimize the process? Yes. How much time is it going to take? 18 months. Can they wait for that? No. So they said, can we actually control the quality of the insights? Probably yes. How do you do that? Through the quality of data that you're getting. So obviously they use one of our products which you might have heard as NiFi. They do analytics on the edge, and they actually choose whether do I send this data which I'm collecting on the edge to the cloud center. I could. There's a cost implication, there's a delay and time implication, or I do over there. Now, if you look at condition-based maintenance, you can do it on the edge. If you look at operations management, you can do it on the edge. Health and safety, you cannot. IoT-enabled R&D, you cannot, because this sits in the background. Enablement of the workforce, you can. But if you look at the ratios of what it is, so the study suggested to us that, again, I'll take the $1 example. If they were investing $1 to get all of these, just purely based on condition-based maintenance and operations management, they could get a return of 64 cents. So the others were important, but for the long term, not for the short term. So the strategy was, I would rather get 64 cents now and avoid the delay and not focus on the 36 cents, rather than go on for 18 months and get the 90 or 95 cents. So the fundamental belief is that when you are creating an IoT ecosystem, it's very important to understand and decide how are you going to prioritize your decision-making process. Because a lot of companies, a lot of organizations struggle with a prioritization matrix. We do it in multiple ways, specifically given the fact that people have started to move into the cloud. Cloud providers will give you multiple tools and solutions around that. We generally do it through a workload-based application matrix, which will allow you to not only decrease your ephemeral workloads, which has an impact on agility and cost, but also allow you to understand which are the workloads that should be going in at the first place. So that is something which organizations should be wary of. So, because I've mentioned so much about data and data being a key enabler for the insights, I just thought I'll just put out some lens. What are the key stats which are there? So I'll go through it quickly. So there are two of them which I want you to focus on. Number one, on the left-hand side, so almost 65% of the large organizations, meaning 10 billion plus, they are disrupting their core business model. If I speak of telcos, we work with telcos who want to become a managed services security provider. BT is a publicly listed company. They make $5 billion just by being a cybersecurity service provider. If you look at logistics firms, they want to become a logistics service company. So we work with a German manufacturer who make fans, industrial fans. They've changed their business model. They don't now sell fans directly, but they're selling it as a service in terms of amount of usage they're going through. If you look at health providers, a lot of them used to sell application variables directly, but now just like the Disney RFID tags, they're just selling the data on insights of it. Because guess what? The cost of the application manufacturer of the variable itself is 3 times cheaper than what it would take them to get the data to a point where they can do analysis on top of that. So that's one. The second is obviously you need to have a data and analytics strategy. A lot of the organizations, so we're beyond the, so we've crossed the chasm curve in continental Europe, I would say at least, whereby big data was not on the top C-suite agenda item. That was probably back in 2014. So we do have a big data maturity scorecard, which measures organizations' maturity across a bunch of domains. But the analysis tells us that most of them understand that a data and analytics strategy is critical for their success. Most of them have made an investment to go ahead and put that investment. However, almost 80% of them are not getting the results that they want to get through. Now, the interesting thing is, which you might have heard at the keynote today as well, that a lot of them are struggling between their data strategy and their cloud strategies. So what we ask some of the executives, not necessarily CEOs, but executives, that what is the one fundamental thing that you would like to change in a world which is as part of the fourth industrial revolution? And most of them came back to us and said that as far as IoT or fourth industrial revolution is concerned, if we can have a way whereby we can actually create that prioritization layer, that's the most important thing. So these are the things which are changing, but the prioritization matrix is a key element which organizations need to do, which what organizations are telling us as well. So I've talked about the enablers, I've talked about the barriers, I've talked about the value. What are the implications? There are multiple implications, but I've just picked up the four key ones. So I talked about the ecosystem, and the steps mean that you have to go through in that order. Security, paramount. You have to start by security. You have to secure your IoT ecosystem, which means not only the fact that me as an organization or I as an individual need to have the systems and everything in the systems and the process in place to ensure that the ecosystem is secure, but that also means that I need to collaborate with other people, because it has multiple implications. Obviously, there's a whole reputational implication if you go through an incident, but there's also implications around intellectual property. There's also implications around the malware incidents which will happen, which is all about the data of people or institutions involved. So that is number one, paramount. Second, interoperability. I told you about that. So there's a working group which was set up in Lausanne in Switzerland by a bunch of manufacturers, including the likes of General Electric. So they decided that the only way they can successfully create an ecosystem whereby you will have IT systems and processes talking to each other is by creating an open source consortium. We all know the benefits of open source, but the key interesting thing is that ecosystem or that consortium will become successful only if at least 50% of the world's top manufacturers buy into it. And that is a big challenge, because a lot of them have geopolitical considerations. A lot of them are having short-term to mid-term financial targets, because that's what the street cares about. So as a part of that, few companies, including Unilever, Google, P&G, and UPS, etc., said that we will set up a specific team which will not be linked to the financial targets, who will not be, it'll be like an autonomous body, which will only focus on pure innovation. It will not be run as a P&L, and that will allow to foster innovation going forward. The implication for that is, number one, you suddenly will see more and more people or more and more organizations coming into as part of the consortium, which is good. But there's a larger implication, which is there will be few people who will have a first mover's advantage. So come 2025 or come 2024, there will be few organizations who would have had a head start in that. And they will probably manage the entire go-to-market and the monetization strategy for a particular region. So that brings up challenges around public policy. So public policy, I would split it into three key areas. One, what is the impact of policymakers? So first thing which comes to mind is if I have to create a smart city, there are multiple rules that I need to create, because the society will look pretty different, be it autonomous vehicles, be it user-based profiling on medical records, be it telematics-based insurance policies, etc. So that's one, on the policy side of things. The second is, how do you still maintain a fair and competitive market? Because these people who started in 2016, now suddenly by 2024, have the ability to not only price, not only dictate in a way which companies they would let in as part of the consortium, but also the fact that they have a direct relationship with the consumers, because all of these companies are mass market companies. So if I'm a consumer and I know that if I go to that specific company because they're part of a secure environment and all of the systems work and talk to each other, there's a high likelihood that I feel that the products in that ecosystem will be secure. There's a high likelihood that I will feel that the success of that will be higher than anyone else who's not, because it's the whole community innovation play. And there's a high likelihood that I'll ignore the other people. So from a policy standpoint, it's a big challenge. So at University of Oxford, there's a program which they've started in the last 2 or 3 years. Some of you might know. It's called as the MSc in the Social Sciences of the Internet. Because a lot of policymakers are saying that it's not only about the technology, it's about what is the impact on the society as large. What about the ethical considerations? We all saw what happened with Facebook. We all heard Mr. Zuckerberg testify to the Congress. And a lot of implications were pretty clear in that respect. That if a large organization like Facebook or anyone who have access to millions or probably billions of people, it's not only about the data that they have, but how do they make sure that the entire ecosystem around them do not misuse that. So that's the second challenge for the policymakers. The third challenge for the policymakers is very simple, that if I create the rules, how do I enforce it? So obviously, the European Union created GDPR. Most of the organizations we speak to believe they will not be compliant by May 25th, which is when the GDPR comes into effect. If you ask them when will it come into effect, almost 80% believe that they will not be compliant a year after. If you look at financial services, so after the 2008 crisis, there are multiple regulations which came out, be it Dodd-Frank, be it MiFID, be it BCBS, etc. Yes, every bank, every hedge fund, every asset manager have had made investments whereby they want to comply. But the regulator every year puts out, if you look at the UK, the FCRA, they put out reports. And guess what? Last year, only 4 to 5% of them were compliant with that, which is a big challenge. So from an enforcement perspective, that's a big challenge for policymakers. So there's a governing body for each of the various ecosystems, but there's no governance at the top, which is who governs which ecosystem does what. So there have been suggestions that you can solve it through using data patterns, because that's based on fact, and you can create pro forma segments, and you can map that for the future. But then the challenge is, it depends upon who's the person who's collecting the data. So a very good question which was posed to the Congress in the US was, because of the whole IoT play in the health system, who owns the data? Is it the patient? Is it the manufacturer who's creating the device? Is it the telco who's using that and allowing their cable to send that through? Or is it the end user? Currently, there is a system in place, but that system is not based on policy. That system is based on whoever has the largest market. If I'm a large telco, I can pretty much dictate whatever I want, because of the fact that it is through my cables that you are forcing through the entire stream of data to go through. But a lot of people have said that the day when Wi-Fi will become free, hopefully soon, with the satellite Wi-Fi coming in through, you'll have to create new policies around that. Then the last one is obviously about talent setup. So in this world, because of the fact it's a constantly changing world. So if you look at the entire IoT world, the IoT ecosystem, back from 2012 to 2014 to 2016 to 2018, every 2 years, the entire go-to-market approach, the entire way about how they interact with the ecosystem changes. Which means if I'm a high talent, if I want to find talent who are highly motivated and are effective, I need to improvise ways whereby I encourage and retain talent. So I put some examples over there around key ways which you can use to retain talent in this new world. So we all have heard about the future of work. We've all been as part of multiple groups whereby we want to understand what will be the implications of the digital work. So I just categorize them into 4 or 5 areas, which is a key thing, because talent, specifically in the technology world, is key. So the survey suggests that the A-typers in the tech world, they join a company, it takes them 6 to 9 months to become the most effective. But unfortunately, they leave the companies after 8 months. So if the span is 17 months, you're investing in them for 9 months, and it's only after 8 months that they leave. So that's a key challenge for most people, specifically if you now are talking about borderless economies, because it's not about only you, it's about everyone else. So the solution is that you need to reconsider your performance data and how you are going ahead with it. Second is the tools. So we have to create a system whereby you're taking away the red tape, you're taking away subjectivity. So Zalando is an e-commerce website in the UK. What they do is, every time, if I'm an individual Zalando, every time I come and talk here, or every time I go into a meeting, every time I take a call, every time I interact with a customer, they have a tool which tracks my entire behavior, which basically means that they're analyzing my behavior on a day-to-day basis from a 360 view. So suddenly you have a very objective view, whether be it around promotions, whether be it around pay, or whether be it around your performance. So that kind of tools are encouraged because a lot of people want to take over the subjectivity. Specifically, if you're a top performing star, the last thing you need is red tape, or because of the fact that your boss or manager doesn't necessarily agree with where you're going. So again, you need to create a data-based system. The third one is, we have all heard as managers that the golden rule has been the bell curve in terms of compensation. It's more so in financial services because the idea is that you incentivize the behaviors that you seek. So top 10 percentile will perform the best. They will probably make more than 90% of the bottom 10 percentile. But studies are suggesting that might have had work in environments which were cutthroat and competitive. But if you look at technology world where a lot of the direction has been around collaboration, a lot of it has been around community engagement, you need to create new business models. I quote the Nobel laureate who's done research around that, but a few companies have started to do it for specific teams. Is anyone here from Google X in the audience? So Google X, they've tried to do this, whereby they're saying, you're working on the most futuristic technologies that the world can ever see, which means you all have to work together. It is a continuous collaboration model, which is where they're saying that we don't have to link your performance to your pay. Everyone gets paid to a certain amount based on their skill set and the value that they bring, but they've taken away the total bonus component out of it so that it fosters innovation. And the last one, obviously, is coaching methods for the future, which you have to improvise on. So that's about it. So I'll pause for a second, and if there are any questions, I'm happy to take. Perfect. Thanks a lot for coming, guys.